I'd like to introduce Todd Delmay, and he's going to give us stories from Stonewall to Hollywood.
Thank you so much to the Hollywood Historical Society, and Karen especially. I think you called me many months ago and asked if I would do this. Last year sometime, so very well organized. And it's so great to see so many of you in the audience today, many of you whom I've known for a very long time. I first gave an iteration of this presentation in 2019 to the Chamber of Commerce, and out of that presentation, Carol Shuhan said, you need to do this as a TEDx, and so I participated in the 2019 TEDx in Hollywood at Young Circle. And then out of that, there have been other times I've had a chance to do this presentation, and what I love about it is that as I kept throwing things in, because there's a lot more that's happened since 2019, and as I kept putting things in, I thought, oh, I have to put this in there, and some of you have already reminded me of things that I left out. So forgive me if I missed something that you wanted to know about. Hopefully we'll have a little time if you have a question to add those things. But the reason that I start with Stonewall, and I understand Robert Keston spoke last year from the Stonewall Museum, is that Stonewall really is kind of that seminal moment in American LGBTQ history that sets us on this path toward what we now celebrate as Pride Month. It was because of Stonewall and that moment that the community started waking up and really making this a movement. And I want to tell you that story because I want to start there because I think there are a lot of parallels between that and things that have happened in Hollywood in hopefully all really good ways. But this is the original Stonewall Inn, which was a bar in New York City. And back in those days, it was very difficult to have a quote-unquote gay bar. There were a lot of laws that were in place that wouldn't allow you to even have a liquor license, so they would have to be very discreet about how they would even get liquor into the building. And the neighborhood, of course, didn't like this idea because everybody thought anybody that's LGBTQ must be, horrible people, and we just don't want them in our neighborhood. And the city of New York did everything that they could to make life difficult for that business, for any business wanting to do that. And they were constantly being harassed by the police as well. There were oftentimes raids where they would go into the Stonewall unannounced and would start a riot. And part of why, this is my opinion, part of why I think that kept going on is because they never expected the patrons to fight back. And what was different in June of 1969 was that they were finally fed up and had had enough of this kind of treatment by their city and their police force that they started to fight back. And that particular night in 1969, they indeed started fighting back. And we know now from our history that many of the people who started fighting back first were members of the trans community, oftentimes black trans women. And legend has it somebody picked up a brick, somebody threw a punch, and it really turned into a fight back. And it wasn't just that night, because that night certainly shocked everybody, and there were lots of stories about what had happened at the Stonewall, and how they presented it in the local papers was like this: homo nest rated queen bees are stinging now. You can just hear the disdain for those patrons. But each night, for successive nights for almost a week, the police would come back and the patrons would continue to fight back. And that protest continued to grow and grow and grow. And if you've ever been to the Stonewall or been to that neighborhood, you can, as the police were pushing in to try and push the crowd back, they were able to simply run around the back of the building and come back behind the police. They were doing everything that they could think of to really shock and surprise the police, and that really set off a moment. And there had been other moments where people had pushed back, but this one was different. It really got the nation's attention.
What street is this on?
Christopher Street.
Oh,
Yeah. And because of that, it's a good time to get that question. A year later, in order to commemorate those riots, so in 1970, was the very first Christopher Street Gay Liberation Day, and it was a parade, and that's why parades are oftentimes part of LGBTQ celebrations, because that's the history of it. And there was one in New York, there was one in DC, San Francisco, and a couple of other cities. And that was the heritage that started coming out of that. So we are now 55 years later, so this is the 55th year after, and that is kind of recognized as the first Pride. And we oftentimes say that Pride is a protest. It started in protest in 1969, but it was these marches that continued to build that movement. It wasn't until 1999 that President Clinton recognized a gay and lesbian month of June, and it was Obama in 2011 who actually made it broader and just said this is Pride Month, it's for all LGBTQ plus people. Like I said, I start with that story because I know we can always get an because these things that happen in other cities and right, they oftentimes affect us here. And I want to bring this next part of the story even closer to home. And in 1977, Anita Bryant, and it's called The Day That It Snowed in Miami. These two women, I don't know if you know them, the one on the left is obviously Anita Bryant. Does anyone know who the other figure is? Her name is Ruth Shack. She is an amazing, well, she's still very active. These two were actually very close friends. In fact, Ruth Shack was, her husband was Anita's manager. And Anita Bryant, if you don't know, was a beauty pageant queen. She was the spokeswoman for Florida Orange Juice. And like I said, they were friends. But Ruth Shack was elected to the Miami-Dade County Commission. And one of the things that she decided to do is she thought that the Human Rights Ordinance, which was already in place in Miami-Dade, that they were going to add sexual orientation as a protected class, meaning you couldn't be fired or discriminated in housing or accommodations if you were LGBTQ. And so she got it on the county commission by a vote, right? So she proposed it at the county commission, they voted on it, it barely passed. It passed by just one vote. This was in January of 1977, which happened to be the day it snowed in Miami. And if you lived here, January 19th of 1977, and it really was kind of a shocking thing that they were able to get it on the ordinance. But it so incensed people like Anita that there was an immediate backlash to it. Immediate. In fact, by June of that year, she had done the work of getting people's attention, and she started basically calling out and saying that homosexuals were pedophiles, they were groomers, and she started an organization called Save Our Children. And the idea was that we cannot allow homosexuals to be teachers or in public spaces because they will be grooming children. And what she did, and how she was able, from her background and just being a celebrity already, was able to really focus people's attention on this. Of course, people didn't like that, and there was the infamous pie in the face. You've ever heard about this? Where she was giving this press conference, and in the middle of it, someone came and threw a pie in her face because people were very upset, obviously, about being called all of these different names. But it was this organization, Save Our Children, that not only did she get Miami-Dade so upset and so riled up by this thing that had happened in January, that by June of 1977, just 5 months later, there was a county-wide referendum in Miami-Dade County where voters chose to rescind all of those protections. They were removed. So they were only in place for those few months. And she then built that as a platform where she went on and she changed Florida adoption law. So for example, she took what the Florida code says, all the rights you get if you are going to adopt a child, and then added one little line that said, no person who's a homosexual shall be allowed to adopt under this statute. So the whole statute is about giving rights to people, but this one thing said, oh, everybody but you if you're homosexual. I'm going to come back to that. But the work that she did really, we see those moments coming back in history and those accusations. But I want to shift now to 2003. I know we're doing a big jump ahead here, but I want to make sure that we're also making a connection to Hollywood. And I'm sure many of you historians know the famous quote at the very bottom, which is from our founder, Joseph Young, who said, "Hollywood will be a city for everyone, from the opulent at the top of the industrial and social ladder to the most humbling of working people. That is that first part. Hollywood will be a city for everyone. I take it literally. I don't know what he imagined the LGBTQ community might look like in Hollywood then or now, but I take it literally. And in 2003, there were a group of people who were very upset by something that had been said at a commission meeting, where one of the commissioners at the time said, at the end of his comments, he said, "Wake up, America, otherwise you have a pervert or a homosexual living next to you." And these three people were so upset that they, of course, went immediately to City Hall and complained about it. And they did end up getting an apology, but it never felt like it was a real full-throated apology. I want to point out the first part that's highlighted there. It says about 10 men and women, including a realtor, salon owner, and exterminator. Anybody know a famous exterminator? So here's what I find so interesting. Stonewall happens in an environment in which the city and the police are doing all kinds of things to harm LGBTQ people, including these raids. When they would raid people, raid the bar and they would arrest people, they would then print their names in the newspaper to make sure that they were shamed publicly, and many of them lost their jobs because of it. Here we are in 2003, and the newspaper didn't put in there Rita Gambardella, Kim Longmire, and Clive Taylor. They put in a realtor, a salon owner, and an exterminator. So that is still a very recent history, but one that I think we just always have to be aware of is that fear of being called out, that fear of being othered, that fear of losing your livelihood simply for who you are, was alive even in 2003, and it's alive today. I want to skip now to 2009. I want to talk about the right to adopt, and this again makes its parallel and a tie back to Anita Bryant. Remember I said how she had changed Florida law? So in 2009, this statute says no person eligible to adopt under the statute may adopt if that person is a homosexual. I want to introduce you to a couple that are Hollywood residents, Melanie and Vanessa Alanier, and their son Ethan. They were one of the first couples to really push back on this. And how they push back on it is that Ethan is Vanessa's cousin's child that they adopted. And when they went through that process, at the time, through the Department of Children and Family Services, when you filled out the form that said, you know, name, address, profession, it would say, "Are you homosexual?" And if you said yes, you were immediately disqualified. Well, Vanessa didn't feel that that was right. She didn't want to lie. And so she banded together with Melanie, and they challenged this ban. Equality Florida was very involved in that case. Nan Rich, I think, was in the Senate at the time, was working with them. They were trying to change the law. It was just very, very, very difficult. And they ultimately got a decision, but it only affected their case where they were allowed to adopt Ethan, but they weren't married. So Vanessa had to adopt Ethan as a single parent. Well, this also has parallels to my story, and you're going to hear a lot about my story in this too. Because in 2010, our son, there he is, cute little baby there, was born. And it was still, in 2010, he's 15 now. In 2010, it was still illegal to adopt in Florida because of that law. And at the time, we really didn't think of it a whole lot, right? We were told, obviously, you can't adopt, as a couple. My husband, who's in the picture as well, he is biologically related to our son. It's his cousin's child that we adopted from birth. And so we decided, and the attorney said, "Why don't, Jeff, you adopt Blake as a single parent?" And she told me to bring some friends and try to blend into the background. I'm 6'3", I don't blend very easily. But we have this moment in court now, so here I am sitting in the back with all the friends, and it upsets me more now thinking about it in retrospect. At the time, I was just willing to do whatever it took to become his dad, right? Like, okay, fine, we have to hide who we are, we're going to do it because it's the right thing for the child. But as soon as the judge was in this hearing, and of course, judges normally, if they suspect anything, they're supposed to ask, right? Like, Jeff, are you a homosexual, right? And disqualify him. He actually probably knew what was going on, and said to our attorney, Liz, would you like, or Ms. Schwartz, would you like to question your client? And of course, the question she asked did not include that question. There were things like, you understand this is forever, and all of that stuff. But when we went up to take the photo, of course, you want to get that family photo with the baby, right? And we had warned all of our friends, like, okay, when this happens, we're gonna go up there, somebody take our picture, but we don't want the judge to suspect that we're standing like a family. So this is the best photo. Jeff's face is turned, it's blurry, I look a little shocked, right? Like, we were just so hurried to try and get this family photo, because for us, it really was a very special moment. Now, this came 2 years after 2008. I didn't put a slide in here for 2008, but 2008 was the year on which Florida voters voted for Barack Obama. He won the state, but the state also voted to define marriages between a man and a woman. It was known as Amendment 2. And it was very striking because even in our neighborhood, right, which we live in the Lakes, we've always felt like everybody, it's a great neighborhood, we love it, we've been there a long time. And then you would sometimes see the sign up, right, for Amendment 2. And you would start to wonder, like, are my neighbors actually supportive of us, right? But it was out of that moment that we knew that things had to start changing. So in Florida, 2008, we defined marriages between a man and a woman. 2009, actually after this, the law was overturned, and we went back later that year, we were able to do second parent adoption, so he is adopted by both of us. And when we adopted him, we actually combined our names. So my husband's family name is Del Sol, my family name is May, and we've been teased for many years about being the Delmay, so we just simply made it official. We legally changed our last name to Delmay, and that little young man there, who's now 15, like I said, he has been a Delmay from his very first birth certificate. And when he was born, in fact, our hearing to have our names legally changed was just 2 days before he was born. So we've only been Delmays a few more days than he has. As history on the national level was starting to change, and we had the Defense of Marriage Act was struck down in the Edie Windsor case, we knew that marriage equality was just a matter of time and things were shifting. And sure enough, in 2014, it was time for Florida to start its fight for the right to marry. And I put this hashtag up there, Love is Louder, and I'll mention it in a moment, but this is our little family. Now we're a couple years later, he hates this photo now, by the way. But there were 6 couples that were selected to participate in the lawsuit. We were one of the 6 couples. And they looked for different ages, men, women. There was one female couple that they were grandmothers, right? They wanted the most diverse looking families that they could find because they wanted people to understand that this was about families. And so on January 21st of 2014, first time I ever stood in front of like a bank of microphones and cameras, and we started that was the beginning of the filing of our case. And when we filed it, we were first told, you know, this fight could take years, we're not even sure if we're gonna win, but you know, this is a fight worth having. And so there we are, all of the 6 couples, and I want to point out, so right in front of me on the left there is Elizabeth Schwartz. So I mentioned her a moment ago, she was our adoption attorney. She grew up in Hollywood, in Emerald Hills, her parents still live there, so there's another Hollywood connection. And then she was also one of the marriage equality plaintiffs for us for this case. So Hollywood has lots of ties to this, and if you look farther over to the left, there you see Melanie and Vanessa again. So all of those Hollywood connections, which I really love. So we filed in January. In July, we had our first hearing, and we were in the famous Al Capone courtroom, you know, in Miami-Dade. We were suing the Miami-Dade Clerk of Courts. And coming out of that hearing, and just the screaming and the loudness, and I mean, I stood in front of microphones, I could not hear anything that I said. It was so loud. There was opposition of all kinds. You don't see the opposition in these photos, but there were people bust in, were protesting, and it was just so loud. And finally, just kind of over all of that, we kept hearing, love is louder, love is louder, love is louder, love is louder. And that was how our side was pushing back on it, was just simply saying, you know what, love is going to be louder than this, and we're going to win this fight. So over the course of the next year, there were a lot of things that we had to do. We spoke on pretty much every local news station. We traveled the state. We did interviews with newspapers, and anytime anything would come up with other courts, hearings, other cases around the country, we were always in for it. Anything, whatever we need to do, and we were very excited. And it was all leading up. Oh, there's Blake. It was all leading up to this day. So January 5th, 2015. Now, interestingly enough, aside from this, so we were suing in state court. We were suing the Miami-Dade Clerk of Courts for the right to get married. SAVE, of which I'm now the executive director in my day job, SAVE and the ACLU filed a federal case. The federal case was filed in March of 14. They also had a hearing in July. And the judge in that case, Judge Hinkle, said, starting January 6th, all 67 counties have to be ready for same-sex couples to be able to get married. So of course, this presented a challenge to the clerk of courts, and he wrote to our judge and said, well, what am I supposed to do? Because January 6th, I'm supposed to start marrying people, but according to your order from the summer, I'm not supposed to marry anybody until this is resolved, because we knew, even though they'd found in our favor, it was being appealed to the 3rd District, it would end up in the Florida Supreme Court. And so she called a hearing on January 5th, the day before, 11 o'clock. And in that hearing, it was to determine what would happen with our case, and knowing that at midnight that night, all 67 counties would be able to start marrying couples. So we go to this hearing, and we and the couple next to us, Kathy and Carla, we had been prepared in advance that they said, well, we don't know what's going to happen. The judge might just lift her stay to go at midnight with the rest of the state. But she can also lift her stay in the hearing. We just don't know. So we and Kathy and Carla, we all did the preparations to get our marriage certificates. And in Florida, there's a waiting period, so you can't go to the clerk's office and immediately get your license and get married. But if you do a 3-hour online course, you can bypass that. So when you go to the clerk's office, you can get your marriage license and get married immediately. So we did that just in case. And so we're in the hearing, and the judges, Judge Zabel and everybody that was against this, and everybody that was for it, we were all in the courtroom waiting for this moment. And then I remember it so vividly, because the judge, she asked first the Attorney General's office, right? She's like, it was Pam Bondi, who is now our Attorney General. Would this make a difference if I lifted it now versus at midnight? And there was a pause, and they said, no, wouldn't make any difference. They knew it was coming. So they asked the clerk of courts, are you ready to marry people? Should I lift it now? And he said, we're ready, Your Honor. And she just simply looked up and said, I'm lifting this day. And the joy, the just excitement that came out of that was incredible. And we ran out of the courthouse like this. We had won, and then of course we took this photo, which I always laugh at, because I'm standing a step lower than everyone, and yet I look like I'm twice the size of everybody up there. But there you see all the familiar faces. Kathy and Carla were next to us, and then Liz Schwartz in the center, and Melanie and Vanessa. And we were just elated from this moment. Like, we had won, this was great, she's lifting her stay. And then we went over to the clerk's office, and followed by literally a herd of media. There were some couples in the clerk's office, like getting their certificates, having no clue what was descending upon this room. And we were just so overjoyed. And we went back to the courthouse, and the judge, who in the case actually married us live on TV, live on CNN, breaking news, surrounded by, I would say, I've got a 360 view of us getting married, because there are cameras all around us. It was such a special day, and I always say we're just so fortunate to have been in the right place at the right time. Kathy and Carla got married, then we got married, so we are the first same-sex couples ever married in Florida.
Wow.
The next day, because the next day, which was January 6th, of course, all the papers already had photos from the day before, so we ended up being on the front page of, we even kicked, the governor, Rick Scott was being, his re-inauguration for his second term was happening. Even on the Tallahassee paper, we were the lead story. Out of that, we had a great opportunity. Our Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz invited us as her guests to the State of the Union in 2015. We got to meet John Lewis, who is one of my personal heroes. He was just so sweet and kept what he said to us, he's like, you're activists and all that. We just felt like we're not worthy, right? He was just such an incredible leader for civil rights. And we also got to go back when the cases then went back to the Supreme Court, which eventually became the Obergefell ruling, which lifted it and made same-sex marriage legal and made it a constitutional right in all 50 states. We went back, we were able to be out there during those hearings. And then a year later, we had a ceremony finally where our family could come and we could really enjoy it. Yes,
That's what
matters. And what's really kind of cool is that the suits that we wore the day we got married now are in the History Miami Museum.
Oh my God.
It's the strangest thing. We had them put out for this special event when family and friends came into town. And I just walked up to it, went to put my arm around it. They were like, "Please, sir, don't touch the artifacts." That used to be my suit. It's now an artifact. It's very, very, very strange. We went once. They were doing an exhibit. They weren't there, and I said, "Where's our suits? Why aren't they out?" And they're like, "Oh, they're on loan to some other museum." So they have a whole other life of their own now. So it's kind of in this moment of excitement and joy and how we felt things were really changing in the country and in Florida too. So in 2019, we come to the founding of the Hollywood LGBTQ Council. And I was getting my hair cut at Hair Industry. Many of you may go there as well. And Kim Longmire came over to me and she said, "We're having this get together. We're going to go to Rita Gambardella's house on a Sunday afternoon. We want to talk about forming something in Hollywood again." And I say again because in 2003, when that issue happened, they actually formed an organization called GLOBA, the Gay and Lesbian Business Owners Association. And the idea was to get business owners to think about the LGBTQ community as patrons and to open their businesses more. But it hadn't lived, I think, maybe a year or two. So it had been a while, and they really felt that the moment had come again where we could make a difference and change things in Hollywood. And so the first thing that we did was we went and sat down with the mayor. And the conversation we had with the mayor that very first time was, as we were forming this idea of what we wanted the council to look like, and we have at least two founders in the room, Andy and David, what we were talking about is what this organization was going to be. What's it going to look like? Is it going to be a networking? Is it going to be like a chamber, like a homeowners? What exactly is it going to be? And one of the first things we noticed was that the Human Rights Campaign, you ever see the blue stickers with the yellow equal sign? That's the Human Rights Campaign. They have an index that they call the Municipal Equality Index. And they send it out to cities of a certain size or larger, and the cities will then fill it out and return it. And they get a grade, a score, up to a maximum of 100. And we looked at Hollywood's score, and we saw a 49. Now, I will say, not because Hollywood wasn't or isn't a welcoming place, it was that nobody had ever paid attention to it, right? The city had never thought about it, right? Nobody had ever spoken up as a citizen and said, "Hey, this is important to me, let's make a difference here." And so the first meeting with the mayor, we also met with the police chief at the time, Chief O'Brien, because part of that score is how the relationship with the LGBTQ community is in relation to its city government and the police. And again, that's that tie back to the understanding of Stonewall, just how important it is to find acceptance and to find the sense of safety and community is when your city government sees you, recognizes you, represents you. And then in April of 2019, we had our first launch thing on the top of the Cirque Hotel, and there we all are, founders of the council, and it felt like such a special time because it felt like it was the right time to do this again, and to build that score. One of the things we did was that June we got the first ever Pride Proclamation from the City Commission. Former Commissioner Blattner, thank you, in the room with us. And we started to make that an annual tradition. We also held that year our very first town hall. We've held one, I think, pretty much every year, David. I think even during the pandemic, we were having them on Zoom. Again, just making a space for people to come together and to have an open dialogue. This was what we set out as our mission, and David has copies of this if you'd like to take one home. But it really states that the mission of the council is to elevate the voices, perspectives, and presence of LGBTQ plus residents and entrepreneurs in shaping the vision for a vibrant and inclusive city. People often ask, like, are you trying to create like a gayborhood, right? Like a bunch of gay people living in the same neighborhood, or like, what are you trying to create? We always said we wanted to just be a part of the municipal life. We want to be part of the city. We want to have people know that our voices, our perspectives, and presence is important. And we also gave additional meaning to LGBTQ. And we, for life, for example, creating a focus on Hollywood as a dynamic place to live and play. Government, really partnering with the government to obviously raise the Municipal Equality Index. To work with businesses. We wanted a relationship with the chamber and with local businesses to have an LGBTQ-friendly business community. We wanted a transformation, and I see it. I have seen through what we've done and through My Hollywood Pride, there has been a transformation of people, LGBTQ people coming from other cities to come to go downtown, to have dinner, to go out. And that's really the kind of transformation we're talking about, and also improving the quality of life through our advocacy, and that it's not for a separate existence for LGBTQ people, but rather to enhance the quality of life for everyone around our shared values, goals, and perspectives, and aspirations. That's really what it was and continues to be about. And one of the programs that we started out of this, in fact, we launched it Valentine's Day of 2020, right before the pandemic, was the Circle of Pride. And that is it's an informal thing that businesses can join to simply show their accepting nature, that their businesses are open and inclusive, and literally all they have to do is agree to 3 very simple things: to have policies for employees and customers that respect gender and sexual identity, support those policies that promote the community, and provide a contact so that they can hold themselves accountable for that. So the pandemic happens, things pull back, of course, but we still wanted to make sure that we were making history. And like I said, we were trying to raise pride by raising the Municipal Equality Index. So we wanted to get out of that 49. So we were doing these things to help the city establish a record as well. And one of the things that we did in 2020 was we raised the Progress Pride flag. I have a copy right here if you can't see it. Many people know the rainbow part. You've seen that many times. But in 2020, this flag became much more recognizable, became more prevalent, and this chevron that's in the middle is meant to also recognize those who are of the trans community, non-binary, as well as those who are Black and brown of an LGBTQ experience. And it sort of signifies that being LGBTQ really cuts across no matter who you are, right? Race, gender, religion. LGBTQ people are everywhere. So when we are talking about LGBTQ rights, we're not talking about something that is specific and only for improving life for LGBTQ people. It actually improves life for everyone. And so there we were in 2020. Hollywood was the first city in Florida to ever fly the Progress Pride flag, and we were only the second in the nation. And now you see this flag everywhere. So again, Hollywood making history. That fall, we had the first ever Equality Voters March. Didn't tell people who to vote for, we just said, it's important to vote, it's important to have your voices heard. And we marched from, my office is at 2131 Hollywood Boulevard, and we marched all the way down Hollywood Boulevard to City Hall Circle, where people could then do their early voting. And that has become a tradition we do every other year when there are elections. I want to get then to 2022. So things, still continuing to pick up, things changing. Here in Hollywood, we had been working on this Municipal Equality Index, and like I said, it had been 49, and then it was 70, and then it was 83, and then finally in 22 we hit a 100 score. And this, yes, please give applause for that. So we've had a 100 score since 2022, and we want Hollywood to keep this 100 score. I want to explain the score a little bit, just so you kind of understand. There are different areas in which the city is graded in order to come up with that. The first is non-discrimination laws. There aren't a lot of opportunities for a municipality to do that, but we are in Broward County, which has anti-discrimination laws on the books, so we get some credit there. But that's regarding employment, housing, public accommodations. The next one is the municipality as an employer. When we first talked to the city did not have inclusive health insurance for all of their employees. And that was one of the first things they changed. Like, they got on the phone to their insurance company and they changed it. So we've had a real partner in the city. Municipal services, whether there's a human rights commission. Now, there's not a human rights commission in Hollywood, but the county has one, so we get the credits for that. There's also having a liaison. So we have a liaison in the city executive's office who is the representative for the city that works directly with the council. So having that liaison gives us points as well. Law enforcement is another area. We actually have a liaison in the Hollywood Police Department. In fact, we recently had two. They kind of do it an east side, west side kind of thing, almost like the NTLs. And also having, the city has to report its hate crimes to the FBI, and if it's related to sexual orientation, being LGBTQ. So not every city was doing that. We thankfully were. So if there's a crime that's recognized as a hate crime against someone LGBTQ, it gets reported to the FBI. That's important for us on a national level of understanding. And then of course the last one, leadership on LGBTQ plus equality, and that's things like the pride flag and raising the flag and proclamations. It's just all of those ways in which the city continues to show that it's an inclusive and welcoming place. I received a note, I think 2 years ago, from an anonymous resident who had seen the pride flag flying, wrote me a note, anonymous, and said, I still don't feel comfortable coming out publicly, but I can't tell you how much it means to see that flag flying and know that my city sees me, right? Sometimes flags, that symbolism really does mean something to people. And for this person, it meant so very much. And I always think about that. We don't know who's going to see that flag when it's flying. It's not the most visible flagpole in the city, right? It's surrounded by the city hall and the library and all that, but there are people who see it, and that is very important. So we decided that with the 100 score, we had to do something. People have been asking us for a long time about having a pride. So our very first My Hollywood Pride happened in January of 2022. And look at the second logo there, presenting sponsor, Hollywood Historical Society. So thank you. And what we started in Hollywood is very different. It's unlike any other Pride, and that's by design. If you remember all the things I've been saying about the kind of community that we want to build and be part of. That first Pride, we also did we do something called the Pride 100 brunch. 100 being the 100 score, and we tell the city we can't have the Pride 100 brunch if we don't have a 100 score, so we have to keep that. But the very first year we recognized, there's Clive, Rita, and Kim, and we recognized them the first year as our trailblazers, because what they had done in 2003 in their efforts. We also raised the Pride flag in January when we have Pride, and people may be wondering why January? Well, I know June is Pride Month, but this is South Florida, and not only is it really hot in June, but also there are a lot of other Prides happening, and we have continued to grow the festival. I think this was the second year. We've adopted the pink and blue and purple, and that we want that fun family spirit. How many of you have been to My Hollywood Pride? Awesome. If you haven't been, come. It is for everyone. We have also started a networking event that goes with that. The next year we honored Francesca D'Amore, who is also a Hollywood resident, trans activist, leader, philanthropist. Like, she's just an amazing person and has done so many great things. And like I said, the programming now has really expanded. This was from this year. We usually do a kickoff event in December that's called the Ugly and Fabulous sweater event. Circle Pride Networking, the Pride 100 brunch. We do a queer comedy night at Cinema Paradiso now. We do Pride at Cinema Paradiso. We do a short film series. And then, of course, the main programming, youth programming. Lisa's worked on that a lot as well. And then we usually finish off the event with what we call a tea dance. So, like I said, this really was a very exciting moment, but as history often teaches us, it's in those moments of excitement and joy and having made progress that there is oftentimes also a backlash. And in 22, which ironically was the year we had our first Pride in January, there came certainly a backlash in Florida. And the first sign of this was really the Don't Say Gay bill. And that bill, I think, did so much damage, not because the actual words, because the words in the statute don't really mean anything, right? They were written vaguely to not mean anything. I happened to be in Tallahassee that year, and when its first hearing was in the Education Committee. And I was talking to a friend, and I said, I'm looking for something to do today. He goes, you need to go to this thing. We're going to call it the Don't Say Gay bill. And I'm like, the what? But immediately had to make sure that we were speaking out against it. And partly because of maybe we were in the marriage equality case, but we ended up doing a lot of different things, just speaking out about this. This is my son's 12th birthday, covered by CNN. Around our pushing back on this particular bill. So again, hoping that Hollywood has a voice in these fights and making sure that we're always speaking up against these things. What's interesting about Don't Say Gay, and many people know of it, is that there was actually a really historic settlement out of it. So most people don't know this part of it. They know about the law that made national news, right? It all was out there. People don't really understand this part of it. So what happened is that during the legislative process, there were lots of things that were said about the bill. Well, does it do this? And legislators would say, nope, it doesn't do that, right? They kept denying all the things that it didn't do. So when we got to the settlement part of it, rather than having the law overturned and just simply having it go away, the strategy was to make sure that there was a settlement to get in writing what exactly was allowed in terms of gay-straight alliances, rainbow flags in classrooms, teaching materials, resources for teachers, resources for students. And perversely, before Don't Say Gay, none of that was in writing. There was nothing in writing that said what teachers could have as resources and what students could engage with in classrooms. And as a result of the settlement, we now have this very detailed list of what is allowed. And it's actually pretty good. Nobody knows about it, right? Part of the Department of Education's mandate was that they were supposed to make sure that every school district, every school understood exactly what was allowed. And that enforcement part just hasn't occurred. But there are a lot of other things that have happened. For example, people are probably most familiar with or heard about the trans bathroom ban. As the executive director of SAVE, I've been working with the ACLU for a while to try and find a way to fight this case. What's interesting is that it is not against the law for a trans person to go into the bathroom and to use it. But in order to break the law, a government official, so it has to be a government building, government official has to come into the bathroom and tell them to leave. They still haven't committed a crime. Only if they refuse to leave have they committed a crime. What's true 99.9999% of the time is people go and abuse the bathroom, and by the time they're done, they wash their hands and they leave, right? Like nobody notices, nobody has been charged under this. Somebody recently tried to challenge it, to intentionally fight it. But these are the kinds of things that we have been fighting, whether it's education policies, like I said, the parental rights in education, which we call Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Don't Say Gay. The pronoun usage restrictions, healthcare and transgender rights have been under attack, banning gender-affirming care, healthcare providers being able to have a conscience protection. Whoever imagined that a healthcare worker could say, oh, this person's LGBTQ, I don't want to treat them. Right? That's just never been the way that our healthcare system should work. Public facilities and performances, the bathroom access restrictions, we've seen the restrictions on drag performances, all of these things that continue to come back and to continue to hit the LGBTQ community. There's a ban on rainbow lighting. So they lit the Jacksonville Bridge for Pride a few years ago, in 22 I think it was. Yeah, it would have been 22. And so the next year they came back and they banned rainbow lighting for bridge. Literally lit the bridge with rainbow colored lights. The proposed ban on pride flags in schools, whether it was a Stop Woke Act, which also, again, the intersection of issues of people's identities, restrictions on diversity, equity, and inclusion training. It has just been an awful lot coming at us. In the session in 24, 21 out of the 22 anti-LGBTQ bills in Florida were defeated. This year, all 20, it was 20 out of 20 were defeated this year. So things do feel like they have improved, but only because we've kind of been through this experience. And what we're seeing now is an uncertain future with things happening similarly on the national level and how it affects us here in Florida. In some ways, our schools have already been through these things. They have, I wouldn't say, maybe a more measured response to it. But how we continue to protect, especially our young people, is very important. What that future looks like, we don't know, but we are writing history every single day. The first thing we want to do is keep it 100, and this was our graphic for My Hollywood Pride this year. We were hoping to move it to Young Circle. That will actually happen next year, but our theme being Keep It 100. We also use the theme Pride Starts Here, and the reason we do that is because My Hollywood Pride is the first Pride anywhere in the world each year. Literally, Pride worldwide starts with Hollywood, Florida, and having that unique history is very important to us. We've wanted to make sure that we are documenting our history. Like I said, in 22, we honored these three trailblazers. In 23, Sabrina Javiana, who grew up in Hollywood, who went on to be the youngest elected official as a commissioner in Hallandale, Francesca D'Amore. And then this year we honored Misty Eyes, who is an amazing, amazing individual. She's a counselor at Sunstar, works with a lot of youth, and she is known as a drag queen, right? She goes out as Misty Eyes. We've had her at every single Pride. First year in 22, nobody said anything. The next year we had her again in the park doing a reading a children's story in the park. And there were all kinds of backlash on that. Somebody from the city called me and said, "What did you do?" I'm like, "We had Misty Eyes, like reading a book like in public where anyone could see her." They're like, "Oh, we know Misty Eyes because Misty Eyes actually does a lot of the training for city employees." The following year we thought, well, we'll put her in a tent because then, nobody will see it, right? But then it seems like you're hiding it, right? So this year we put her on main stage. We made sure everybody saw her, and you know what? Even though there are kids around her, the adults stood in the audience, fixated, just glued to every word she was reading. It was such an amazing experience, and that's really what Pride is about, making sure that there is visibility for our community. This was our committee photo this year. It's become a tradition every year to get on stage and take that photo. I want to tie this back again to what I said earlier. Having your police force enforced, out, visible at Pride is so important to us. The city has, the HPD has provided additional officers just to make sure that the event is the safest, most fun, amazing event. And again, all of our elected leaders, commissioners, the mayor, showing up, it is such a great feeling knowing that things have really come a long way since 1969. Like I said, I am now the executive director of SAVE. So SAVE stands for Safeguarding American Values for Everyone. SAVE has been in this advocacy fight for a long time because of Anita Bryant in 1977. SAVE was founded in 1993 with the hope of getting those protections back on the county ordinance. In 1998, through oh my gosh, her name just went right out of my head, the company. Getting someone elected to the county commission, she put it back on, it passed by 1 vote again. Again, we had a backlash from the right trying to undo it, but SAVE was the one that built the field plan door to door to just get friends and neighbors to understand why this was so important and to get people to vote against rescinding those rights, and won the day. And I recently stood with some of our founders at SAVE, and we turned over a whole collection I've been working on of historical items that SAVE has documented about South Florida, primarily SAVE history, but all the things that have happened in South Florida since the 1970s, and we turned them over to the University of Miami and founded the SAVE collection, which will be cross-referenced with Ruth Shack, who was the county commissioner in 1977, but Ruth Shack went on to be one of the founders of the Miami Foundation. She was just, and is still, an amazing leader. My husband has also stayed very involved in the work. In fact, my husband, and I apologize, this was the highest resolution photo I could find of here like this, but he has just finishing his term as board co-chair of Equality Florida. So once you're in the fight, you feel like you're always in the fight. If you'd like to learn more, of course, I encourage you to go to the Stonewall Museum archives. Great resources. The Stonewall Museum and Archives is actually located here in Fort Lauderdale. It's not in New York. And the gentleman on the lower left is Mark Neil Silvers. He, if you don't know him, he is the founder of the Stonewall Museum, and he is from Hollywood. He messaged me this morning and said, I'm so sorry I can't be there. So we have a real shared history of community and courage. Hollywood's history is woven with stories of visibility, resilience, and progress from the founding of the council to the celebration of My Hollywood Pride. Today, in the face of growing political attacks on the LGBTQ community, our call is clear. We must stand together, not just as LGBTQ people, but as neighbors, allies, and citizens committed to dignity, fairness, and belonging for all. You don't have to be LGBTQ+ to be part of this movement. Just be willing to care about others, even when they're different from you. Because when we protect each other, we protect what's best about America and about Hollywood. Coming up this month, we have a couple of events I want to encourage you to participate in. Everyone is welcome. On the 4th, which is next week, we will be doing our annual Progress Pride flag raising at City Hall. Starts at 12:30. Come out. There's usually, it's a 10 or 15 minute thing. We raise the Pride flag. There's usually a performance. Somebody sings a song. And then that night, we're doing a Circle of Pride networking event at the Vintage on Harrison. So come out, network with us, come to meet more of the community. And then on June 19th, we're participating with the Legacy Builders who are doing a Juneteenth event. So it's a really great collaboration and cross between Juneteenth and celebrating African Americans and also celebrating LGBTQ identities. So that will be at the Hollywood Central Performing Arts Center. I think that's it. I know I've told a lot of stories. I hope that you have enjoyed it and learned something today.